Right, so this is the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, welcome to the Free Energy Special Interest Group 42nd meeting. Today is Wednesday, the 6th of September 2017. We are in a different location right now. Before, I think I have to introduce everyone here because the recording just started. I would like to introduce the leader, Dr. Hughes, who is hosting this meeting, our Fesig 42nd Fesig meeting here in her home. And we had great fun producing Fesig's first music video, which we call titled Power for Nothing, What's for Free. And we had a great time, and we had a cast of 8 actually here, and Elizabeth is here as well. Elizabeth Donovan, Dr. Elizabeth Donovan, Dr. Hughes, myself, Crystal, our founder of Fesig, and we have the others who are in the background. They come and go. You see them as they come in later. So now, without much ado, after all this introduction here, I'm going to start the sharing screen again. In the background, we hear some noises because our sound engineer, lighting expert as well, has been fixing up some lighting in the background. Yeah, thank you, Guido. Thank you so much. Here's Guido, very talented sound engineer. You will see later once we have our music video up. You'll see later. So here we are. It's a very exciting time. We have many breakthroughs in this beautiful place, which is the leader, Dr. Hughes' home. Okay, so welcome to Fesig Free Energy Special Interest Group, and this is our 42nd meeting. As you know, if you go to our website, the Free Energy Special Interest Group is a platform for scientists, researchers, developers of free energy, alternative energy to come together to research and develop alternative energy in a very relaxed platform that is very open to all, to share ideas, to help each other out with the missing pieces of the puzzle, where science and spirituality meets to come up with breakthroughs for humanity. Yeah. So go to our website, truevisionofpeace.com/fesig.html. Fesig is spelled as F-E-S-I-G. So today's agenda is, I've done a quick presentation of Fesig to you now, and now I've also introduced the members of the team here, the production team of Fesig. And a report of Fesig's last meeting will be read out to you in a moment. I am chairing this meeting, co-chaired by Dr. Fresno, who's present here. And the speaker today is, Patrick. Patrick Kelly is one of the pillars of the study of exhaust free energy internationally. His official websites are freenergyinfo.tuks.nl and freenergyinfo.co.uk. If you go to our website, truevisionofpeace.com/fesig.html, you'll be able to see his website links. He authored an ebook of over, I think, about 30 chapters. Correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick. Patrick published the book titled The Practical Guide to Free Energy Devices and keeps it up to date. He has painstakingly researched to develop and archive a compendium of free energy information with coverage of historic and contemporary devices for our study reference, which he updates regularly with his personal comments on viability. Now, he even illustrates his book by himself, which is quite incredible, and the blueprint has been put up meticulously by himself. Now, this has become the school standard reference manual for free energy scientists, researchers, developers, and students. In this meeting, he will continue to present some 43 devices or more. And after this meeting, the next meeting, we will adjourn to our 43rd meeting on the 20th of September, 2017, same time, when Mark McCandish will be talking about the secret space program, a flux liner and related technologies. And this is pending confirmation because we don't really know. Of course, he wants to speak in physics and he's very delighted we've invited him, but pending his schedule, all right? So we want to know whether he could actually speak on that date. If not, Elizabeth will come in with her presentation, right?
He's a well-known aircraft and aviation illustrator as well.
Wow. He's being introduced by Dr. Donovan for physics, to speak in physics. Okay, so that's it. So this is brought to you by me, the founder of Fesig. And if you want to write to me, Crystal, it is crystal@truevisionofpeace.com. Right. So I shall stop sharing now. Okay, now over to you, Patrick. Would you like to? Oh no, hang on a minute. Before I do that, I forgot to do a report of the last meeting. And pardon us, over here there are dogs around in this area because it's in the country, in the mountain. It's kind of like a retreat, so you can hear dogs barking in the background. Right, now I would like to do a quick report of the last meeting. Which you can find in our website, really. If you go to truevisionofpeace.com//Fesig, Fesig.html, you see the report there. And the report is on the 41st meeting that was held on the, I will share screen so you can see for yourself as I read it out. Okay, just give me a moment. I'll share screen again. Share screen. Okay, here you are. This is, okay, let me just show you. I scroll through quickly for those who are new to physics. This is physics website. Okay, you see our website address like that. And if you scroll down and read about what we do, and then you will see Elizabeth, the lineup of speakers in the very next few meetings. I haven't yet to get Mark McCandish up here. And this is our YouTube channel, our Facebook, and then we have the report here of the 41st Physics meeting, right? So the 41st Physics meeting went very well, and Elizabeth gave a very interesting presentation that you shouldn't miss, really, because it is giving us so much hope that we are going to be our own breakaway civilization or society, because immortality could be a possibility, isn't it, Eliza? Yeah, yeah. So she talked about what's the title of your talk? The last talk? So it's all
practical regeneration.
Practical regeneration, yeah.
Oh, one thing I should mention is that for those who are fans of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, this is number 42. As far as the meetings, which is supposed to be the key to the universe.
That's right. Hooray to that. So there you are. So transhumanism is going to be obsolete. Humanity's, and Eliza did say, humanity's creative energy is something that cannot be replicated. It is a very sought after nature. Human life will have greater value. So Elizabeth, in your next meeting, in your next presentation, you'll be talking about planetary engineering?
Yes, and also politics and energy.
Yeah.
So, and politics and energy basically is the monumental problem of how to insert these technologies into civilization, present civilization. And there is a way of doing it, and it's not insurmountable.
Right. So please make it a point to attend our meetings, because you can then speak to Elizabeth live, and you can speak to Patrick live now. All right. So without much ado, I'm going to pass over the microphone to you, Patrick. There you are. Over to you, Patrick. I'm going to mute myself, so all the noise, the country noise and sounds here are going to be muted, so you're uninterrupted. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Can you see this document all right?
Oh, hold on a sec. Can I? Okay, I can't mute you until I. Now I can. I can mute myself now. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we can see.
Okay, Crystal, I'll take over if that'll help.
Yeah, please take over.
I've got a quiet mic. Okay.
Yeah, I'll make you host now, Fres. It's not on Fres.
Okay.
On your personal Fres Frezzle. If that's all right.
Yeah, the Fraz Frazzle account would be great.
Oh, done it. Yeah.
Okay, that works.
Mute.
Welcome, Patrick. And yes, we can see your presentation, the document you have on the screen.
Okay. This is a very simple and straightforward presentation. There's nothing special about it. But please understand clearly that this presentation must not be thought of as encouragement that you should attempt to construct anything shown or discussed here, as this presentation is for information purposes only. Now, a thing that's important about free energy devices is that people are of the impression that you have to be very clever to be able to make a free energy device. Well, this device here is made by a man called Dennis Saburin. He is a person who has difficulty with English. He has no real knowledge of electronics. He has no real finance at all. His house doesn't have electricity supplied to it. And this is a design of his, which is self-powered and which can charge a mobile phone battery. Now, this is an unusual device. He starts off with a 5-volt fan, a 5-volt fan that you can buy on eBay. And on that fan, he is stuck with hot glue, a circular plastic float that's used on a commercial fishing net. That has got attached to it a series of 4 neodymium magnets. They're N52 grade, 20 millimeter diameter, circular neodymium magnets. And he spins this using a motor, the motor of the fan itself. But he does it with a very, very small amount of electricity. He uses what's nominally called a 3-volt lithium battery. It's actually slightly more than 3 volts when fully charged. But he cuts the drive by supplying less than the correct voltage to it. And he surrounds that rotor with 8 coils. Each of those coils has been wound with 2 strands of 50 grams of 0.19 millimeter diameter enamel copper wire. The coils are connected in pairs in a most unusual way. You will see them here. He has 1 winding of 1 coil connected to 1 winding of the next coil, and so on throughout the set. He then rectifies the output with a diode bridge to get a physical output. Now, it's interesting. He underruns this to such a degree that the input draw of electricity is very, very small. He uses just a single battery to drive the 5-volt motor. The rotor rotates at only 1 rev per second or so, and he has coils all around the rotor. The flow of electricity from the coils goes through the diode bridge and charges a second lithium battery. And that second lithium battery goes out through a USB module, which is a commercial unit, to charge a mobile phone battery. Now, lithium batteries are difficult to charge safely, but it's okay to do it when you're feeding it through a mobile phone, because the mobile phone itself has got control circuitry so that you don't overcharge or damage the lithium battery. Now, this is an interesting arrangement. The lithium battery, which runs the motor, is discharging steadily. And although it can keep the drive motor running for a very long time, he dealt with that problem by diverting the charging current to the battery and feeding it to the first battery for about 10 seconds every 10 minutes, using a switching circuit, an external switching circuit. But that's a simple task, and so he changed the arrangement so that it would feed a small amount of the charging current that normally goes to battery 2 back to battery 1. He used a relay in the switching box, but it's not necessary to do that, because what you can do is just connect a diode across, skip your switching box altogether, control the current with the resistor, and that keeps the first battery continuously charged for as long as you want to run the system. This system runs indefinitely. It's self-powered, and it's quite capable of charging a mobile phone battery. Now, this is quite an interesting arrangement. This is the particular fan that he was using, that he is using, in fact, and this is built and run by a man who doesn't understand electronics, and a man who refuses to wind any coils, and he tends to use components salvaged from old equipment and toys. And the circuit itself relies, thankfully, on the control circuitry inside the mobile phone. But please let me put to rest forever and ever the idea that you have to be an electronics expert to build anything in free energy. This is a useful arrangement, and it's built with not a great deal of skill, but with great determination by Dennis. Right, another very simple arrangement has been set up by a man known as Mr. Wilson of Texas. And he had a 5-foot diameter, 2-inch thick wooden table, which was circular. So he took it off, he put it on an axle, he gouged a groove around the outside and hit in nails at a V angle all the way around his table to try and keep in position a drive band that he made up. Drive band he ran around a DC motor, which keeps the wooden flywheel, what effectively it is. It's very heavy. And the drive band goes round 2 generators from cars, which are driven by 2 car batteries. And then there's a load driven off that. Now, this arrangement is very crude, very mocked up, hard together. It is a 60 kilogram wooden table, effectively. It's the same as Chas Campbell's design, where you have a flywheel driven by a motor driving a generator, and the generator powers the flywheel. This worked very effectively for 3 days. And at the end of the 3 days, his nails started coming out, and eventually he had to stop the system. But it is a system that works, and works well. But let me stress again, this is set up by somebody who knows really nothing about what they're doing. And this design was very crude. It's a copy of Chas Campbell's arrangement to create a driven flywheel which is self-powered and drives an external load. The table itself weighs at least 60 kilograms, even though it's made of wood. It's a very effective system, but it's made by somebody who knows really nothing about what he's doing. And it was so badly built that it fell apart within 3 days. But it does work, and it does work perfectly well. So let me put to rest forever the idea that you have to be an expert to build something which is a free energy design worth having. Moving on then, we come to Teru Karwai's electric motor patent, which is US patent 5436518, issued in July 1995. This gentleman is a Japanese, and he was intimidated into not producing his engine. He was intimidated during a meeting with Tom Bearden. And he was visited in that meeting by some Japanese mafia types who frightened him so much that he pulled out and never followed it up again. But you have a simple design here. It's a motor that has more than 3 times the output compared to the input. The left-hand diagram shows the front face of the motor with its 12 red electromagnets surrounding an unusually shaped steel rotor. The steel rotor is shown in yellow here and has got 3 projections in it. The right-hand diagram shows a cross-section through the motor. The blue rectangles are permanent magnets, which he described as being a ring of magnets, though it's not immediately obvious why a circular ring magnet, like in a loudspeaker, should not be used. Perhaps none were available with the necessary diameters that he needed. He also says that the magnets are bolted to the rotors, which is not immediately obvious either why you'd need to bolt them, because they will stick on. Anyway, the frame material supporting the ball bearings and electromagnet, shown in darkish blue here, are non-magnetic material. And while aluminium is mentioned, I'd strongly recommend that neither aluminium nor copper is used, especially since plastic chopping board material is very cheap and very robust. Both aluminium and copper have got strong magnetic properties, even though permanent magnets don't stick to them. The rotor and stator are rather unusual. The rotor itself is made of steel and is so magnetic. It has the magnets attached to it in such a way that you have a north pole here and a south pole there. Now, the interesting thing is, with this triple shape, you get 3 south poles on this rotor and 3 north poles on that rotor, even though they're physically the same, or manufactured the same, if you like. The frame itself has got coils at 12 positions round the 360-degree circle. This is an interesting arrangement. It's a very similar switching arrangement to that of Charles Flynn's magnet motor. The input power switching occurs 4 times per revolution, and it occurs just as the leading edge of a rotor arm, which is here, approaches an electromagnet. The powered up electromagnets are shown in blue here. So he shows this shaded area as indicating the electromagnetic path at the moment. The arrangement of doing that is switched using what is very effectively arranged as an optical disc attached to the side of the rotor itself. It's attached to the rotor drive arm. That will work perfectly well. The only thing I have against that is that you have a fixed rate of revolution of the motor depending on the applied voltage and the load that is being driven by the motor itself. Now, the result of a test run on this motor, where he used pure steel as the magnetic material, the steel was 30 millimeters thick with teeth of 218 millimeter diameter. The notches are 158 millimeter diameter. 1,000 Gauss ferrite magnet was used as the permanent magnet, and electric power of 19.55 watts was applied to the electromagnets. Now that's 17 volts at 1.15 amps. This produced a rotation of 100 revs per minute with a torque of 60.52 kilogram centimeters and an output of 62.16 watts. Now, that's all right. He records the result of a test run on the motor. He used pure steel as the magnetic material. It was 30 millimeters thick, 218 millimeters diameter, and notches of 158 millimeters diameter. A 1000 Gauss ferrite magnet was used as the permanent magnet, and electric power of 19.55 watts was applied to the electromagnets. Now that was 17 volts at 1.15 amps. This produced 100 revs per minute with a torque of 60.52 kilogram centimeters and an output of 62.16 watts. Now, while a switching disk certainly works well, it will produce a rotational speed which is determined by the power supply and the load. And I suggest that a power supply operating from a divide by N chip would give you speed control as well as the necessary switching that you need to use. The speed control chip would be a CD4022 BC type, and it would have pin 11 connected to pin 15 to give you 4 outputs that repeat one after the other. They call them outputs 0, 1, 2, 3, and those rotate round and round. All right, moving on again, assuming that we can succeed in moving on again, and that you can actually hear me, we come to a very interesting arrangement by Raoul Haytham. This arrangement has powered hotels, but scientists dispute him because they say that what he does is impossible. Unfortunately, it isn't impossible. Now, what he has done is he has taken a motor and he's driven a whole series of 4 generators off that one motor. And what he has done to do that is he has organized discs created from 3 thick circular cuts of a material, each of which has got powerful neodymium magnets attached to them. They're angled so that they rotate, and the magnets always match with each other as they rotate. He has 36 rare earth magnets on each of these rotors, and the motor is driven round and the generator rotates round due to the magnetic attraction. The rapidly rotating magnetic field draws in extra electrons from the surrounding environment, and the rapid series of pulses which each rotor receives also draws energy from the gravity field. The really big gains are got when one motor drives several generators. The rows of magnets are angled in opposite directions in each rotor so that they match perfectly as each disc rotates. The first disc has them in one angle, the second disc has them in the opposite angle. The angles match, of course. And while the magnets are expensive, that's a very simple way to access free energy. Okay, moving on to another extremely simple mechanism for gaining free energy. We always think of new high-tech designs being needed for achieving high levels of usable power where you're not connected to the main supply grid. That's not always the case. This design is low-tech, but it's very effective. It comes from Frenchman Michael M. in his 1893 patent. Effectively what it is an earth battery. There are small pockets dug out of the earth and later filled in with loose soil. There are outside electrodes which are made of a metal and inner electrodes which are made of a carbon rod. And the material that surrounds these rods is saturated with an electrolyte. So effectively you can say that this is a battery, but in actual fact, as it's actually installed in the earth, you get considerably more power from it than you would expect. You need to keep the material around the rods continuously dampened up. And you can do that with a pipe and a tank if you want, or you can just pour material into each of the containers as you go along. The ground around these electrodes is saturated with a solution which is rich in oxygen, chlorine, bromine, iodine, or fluorine, or with the salt of an alkali. The steel electrodes are replaced with magnesium, and if you do that, the result is excellent, with each cell producing 2.25 volts. With 12 volts or 24 volts being the desired target voltage, a powerful inverter can be operated to drive heavy load household equipment, such as a washing machine or a tumble dryer. Now, this particular system produces an excess of 3 kilowatts of electrical energy at mains voltage and mains frequency. And it is certainly not what you describe as a high-tech. Okay, right. We have the situation of aerials being used to generate power. Some of them are very simple and low power, like the first two I described. But Herman Plausen, in his 1925 patent, demonstrates systems which can generate at least 100 kilowatts of power. Now that's a serious level of power, much more than any household would need. But the simple systems here that come from several developers, such as Jez, Alex Core, and Dragon. A basic simple module for creating energy is, in this case, a drum of wire, which forms eventually a single strand going down to an electronics module, which feeds on to an earth connection. The electronics module is very simple. You have 2 small capacitors. You've got 4 rectifying diodes, which are preferably germanium, because they have very low voltage drop across them. And they feed 2 electrolytic capacitors, which then give you an output plus and minus, which is quite effective. If instead of the coil of wire at the top, you were to use a shiny plate, Tesla recommends the plate should be insulated with plastic, but either way, the plate itself acts as a good receiver. And you can build the module components directly in midair if you want, or you can build them up in complete sets together. In the case of having a plate aerial, what you do is you connect the modules halfway down the aerial, between the aerial and the earth. Now you would think that that would be impossible to feed signal to the modules, but that's not the case. They're individually earthed with a distance of at least 2 meters between the 2 earthing poles. And that is very effective to produce energy. You can increase the efficiency of the modules by duplicating it and putting a mirror image on the other side. And that doubles the output. The modules can be put in large numbers. Dragon put 100 of these original modules together on 2 boards like this, and he got 96 watts continuously out of his 2 boards. Now, the Alex Core aerial system is very similar. It's pretty much the same as Thomas Henry Moray's style of aerial. It has a long horizontal aerial, and then a vertical feed to the circuit. And the circuit feeds through then to the earth, and the rectified output is used to charge a battery. The longer the aerial, or the greater the number of aerials used, the greater the rate of charging. And it's suggested that the aerial should be connected between the eaves of a house and a nearby tree. And the aerial wire should be at least 0.5 millimeter in diameter, and it needs to be insulated from its supports. Plastic nylon cord is very good for doing that. Another technique that he uses for this is he uses 3 modules which charge up an electronic or I beg your pardon, an electrolytic capacitor, 400 volt, 100 μF. So the 100 microfarad capacitor charges up, and it is used to charge a 12 volt battery. And the way it does it is it has a silicon controlled rectifier, which is normally switched off. And that rectifier is switched on when this neon bulb fires. Now, a neon bulb normally fires between 90 and 110 volts. And you need to have 12 volts added to that for the voltage on this capacitor to actually shunt the system alive and push a charge of electricity from the capacitor into the battery. But that's a system that works very well. We think of aerials as being low powered, but they're not actually if you know what you're doing. Lawrence Rayburn of Canada developed a much more powerful aerial system, which he calls the TREC. It gathers 10 kilowatts of power continuously. And with that level of power flowing in the circuit, it's potentially dangerous for people who are not familiar with high power, high voltage circuits. The aerial system has two 4-foot diameter Archimedean spirals made out of 3/4 inch soft copper pipe. Each spiral is sandwiched between two sheets of Lexan plastic, and they're mounted 30 feet apart vertically. So one is mounted above the other, and they're connected together by two wires. One wire from the end has a spark gap in it. The other wire from the centers is divided in two and feeds a series of coils which are not physically connected together, but they induce electric currents progressively throughout the chain of coils. This produces a voltage of 600 volts in this general area here. You use a signal generator to modulate that to the frequency you want, which would be 50 cycles a second in most of the world, and 60 cycles a second in America. This output transformer steps down the voltage to the power level you want, but you must remember that this output transformer has to be powerful enough to handle the entire current of 10 kilowatts, and your load is then powered by that, between that and the ground. The main system is earthed with a very powerful earth, which has to be at least 16 square feet of metal plate buried in damp soil. Let me stress again that this circuit is high power. This circuit could kill you, just as fooling around with your mains wall socket can kill you. People often ask for 10 kilowatt free energy power systems, and I don't think they have any notion of what 10 kilowatts actually is. If you're talking about a 12 volt battery powering an inverter, you're looking at 50 volts, 50 amps, I should say, going into the inverter if it's a 220 volt inverter, or 100 amps going into it if it's a 110 volt inverter. So this is a system which is large, it's powerful, and because it's powerful, it's dangerous. Now, aerial systems are passive. They generally don't need any form of user-supplied input power. The same applies to a range of orgone devices, such as the famous Joe cell, named after Joe Noble of Australia, who, with Graham Coe and Peter Stevens, popularized the device in 1992. Joe Noble did not invent the device. He was working from an earlier patent. Orgone devices are strongly affected by people near them. A Joe cell can run an engine without the need for any form of fuel, as it concentrates our surrounding energy field and feeds it into the engine. Bill Williams of America has run his Ford pickup truck for many miles without needing any form of fuel. A Joe cell is comprised of several concentric cylinders of stainless steel. The version that was made by Joe Noble was the wrong size. And because it was the wrong size, it needed special treatment. It's filled with water, and the water in Joe's case had to be specially treated with step after step of treatment to get it to what's called stage 3. Joe himself has got a very powerful U factor, and because of that, he managed to get engines running on his version of the Joe cell. The actual reality is that the Joe cell dimensions need to be specific. Now, these dimensions shown here are the essential dimensions that you need for a Joe cell. Because you need specific dimensions, it's generally a case that you have to build up each individual cylinder from a sheet, which means that there's a join in the sheet. Now, if you do that, you need to align the joins. They can be TIG welded. They are stainless steel. But if you get them in the correct size, any form of water will do. You can fill it from a local tap, and it will go immediately to stage 3. And in fact, the only way to stop the Joe cell working is to take it apart, because it's self-powered effectively. And the trouble, of course, with the Joe cell powering an engine is to stop the engine. It's very, very difficult to stop an engine powered by a Joe cell, because it just runs and runs and runs. Now, there are 2 sets of dimensions here that can be used. You have an outlet pipe, which is metal, but that metal outlet pipe must not touch the engine block. The last inch or so has to be a plastic pipe so that the Joe cell is not electrically connected to the engine itself. It uses a conical lid, ideally with a 57-degree slope, and inside the cell you have a series of different sizes of stainless steel concentric cylinders. The gap between them is 13.097 millimeters. I know that sounds very accurate, but this is the way it needs to be built. The thickness of the tubes are specified, and the dimensions of the whole thing is shown here. Pardon me. The actual Joe cell itself inside is insulated from the outside container, and it's quite readily possible to build a Joe cell like that. Now, that technology has led on to a very simple device which does the same thing. That simpler device is just a plastic tube which has a series of coils wound on it, 3 coils to be specific. The first coil is wound to specific size, 2 millimeter wire diameter of enamel copper wire. And when the first winding is done, it's covered over with a layer of insulating tape, and a second winding is done on top of that. It's a different sized winding using the same wire. It then is covered over again with plastic insulating tape, and a third coil of wire is wound, again using the same wire. The details of the number of turns and so on are in the ebook if you want to see them. Okay, the third winding is wound on top again of an insulating layer of tape. The actual number of turns are specified in chapter 9 of the ebook, and the actual lengths of wire that you need are also specified there. The contributor of this information was getting 20% better car MPG using this very simple coil. But it's quite possible that this coil arrangement can run a car without any fuel being needed, and development is continuing on this particular design. Okay.
Patrick, can I jump in real quick on the question
Sure.
on that one?
Yes.
Is this an electrical drive to the engine, or is it a hydrogen oxygen, a Brown's gas type of arrangement?
No, there is no uh, gas of any description. There's no flow of any visible fuel. This is like a Joe cell. It's transferring orgone energy directly into the engine itself.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Continue, please. This
Yeah.
is very interesting.
Okay. The next thing is a system that has been used to run a 250cc motorcycle on public roads. Now, this is a very simple system built by an American guy called Zach West. He performs electrolysis of water, so this does actually feed gas into the engine. He made a home-built electrolyzer, and he then bleeds off most of the oxygen, making the gas far less volatile, and he stores some of the gas in a tank, ready for increases in load, such as accelerating away from traffic lights. His system is like this here. He has a water container with an airtight cap. This feeds by gravity a series of 8 electrolyzers inside a container. The container holds the gas and pushes it out through a high and very tall bubbler. The bubbler is 14 inches tall. The bubbler has a partition so that above the water surface you get gas which is separated by an electromagnet, which is part of the electrical supply to the electrolyzer. It's not perfect by any means, but what it does is it removes a good deal of the oxygen, and that's pushed out through an exit tube into the open atmosphere. The bit that isn't is predominantly hydrogen, and that's pushed into a tank which rises to a pressure of 30 pounds per square inch. That then feeds on through the throttle to the motorcycle engine. The electrolyzer is driven by electronics, but the electronics is very simple. It's just an ordinary DC motor speed control circuit, which you can buy very easily on the market. It's driven by the 6-volt battery of the motorcycle system. And motorcycle systems are very poor in producing electricity. But leaving that aside for the moment, the electrolysis is carried out in a piece of plastic pipe, which is 2 inches in diameter and 10 inches tall, and sealed with a PVC cap top and bottom. It has a series of electrodes which produce the electrolysis. Those electrodes are 5 inches across. That's 125 millimeters. Now, they're actually rather badly drawn here on the left. It's very difficult to draw these things. They're wound from stainless steel shim stock, which is very thin, springy stainless steel. There are separators between the turns of this, but one long length is used to twist round to form a long length of electrode. Two electrodes are there, one positive, one negative. And the gas that's produced by that comes up into the area above the electrolyte and goes out through a gas vent into the overall containing box. The water supply acts like in a cage for a bird, where the water feeds in only far enough so that the air pressure of the earth keeps it from getting any deeper. So that is the cross-section of the device itself. Now, looking at the arrangement electronically, you've got a 6-volt battery going through a 30 amp fuse and a relay for switching it on and off to the 30 amp DC pulsar, which produces a square wave. The square wave frequency or rate is adjustable. That passes through an electromagnet, very simple, to the electrolyzers, which are connected in pairs, in parallel. So you have 4 sets of parallel electrodes there, which means with 6 volts, they're getting about 1.5 volts across each of the electrolyzers. The way that they're connected is very simple, just straight parallel connection. One end is connected to the matching end in the next one, and the same with the start of the first end. The actual commercial pulsar that he uses looks like this. You got a large heat sink, which is bolted onto the main transistor of the system. You've connector blocks for input and output. You've got the speed control variable resistor there, and a couple of integrated circuits that generate the signal. The whole system itself is very simple. The pressure tank is one that he made himself. It's made from 4-inch diameter PVC pipe. It has PVC end caps and a decent-sized plastic pipe of 10 millimeter diameter glued into each end. And this forms a good, solid, high-pressure tank for the H2 gas. So the overall system is very simple. You have a water tank feeding the electrolyzers, and the electrolyzers feed through a bubbler, which is used with electromagnet to separate a fair degree of the oxygen and vent it out to the open air. In my opinion, the motorcycle battery is not sufficient with the motorcycle electrics to create sufficient power to run this system. But if you were to carry an additional battery and do the charging of the additional battery using a solar panel, you make the motorcycle effectively a solar-powered vehicle and effectively fuelless in operation. That's a good system which has been driven on the road and is, in my opinion, something that is well worth knowing about, if nothing else. Now, experts tell you that it's quite impossible to run a generator on gas that's produced by the output of the generator. They say it can't be done. The only trouble is that it can, and it often has been done. The way that it's done is you have to delay the spark timing. Well, you have 2 options. First option is you can delay the spark timing of the generator itself, because the HHO gas produced by electrolysis ignites 1,000 times faster than petrol does. And so the spark has to come later. Now, it's not very easy to adjust the spark on a generator because they're not expecting you to ever have to do that. But you can do it, and when you do it, you add cold water mist, because that turns into flash steam inside the cylinder and makes the generator operate as an internal combustion steam engine. Alternatively, you can bubble the HHO gas through acetone, and doing that delays the timing so that you don't need to alter the timing at all. You have to add cold water mist as before, and the arrangement is very simple. You have a generator, which is effectively a motor driving an alternator. Most of them have a 12-volt output and a mains voltage output. You use the 12-volt output to power the electrolyzer. The gas from the electrolyzer is fed into the incoming air that goes into the motor, and you feed cold water droplets into the motor as well. And although this looks simple, it's capable of supplying kilowatts of excess power where there's no electrical grid. A simple Venturi tube can produce the cold water mist droplets. Now, Venturi tube is very simple. It's just a pointed tube with a small diameter hole passing through the pointed tube. When air flows past that tube, it draws out tiny droplets of water. And what you do is you put it in the incoming air stream into the motor. And that is very effective in providing the droplets into the engine. So in more detail, your generator is a motor and an alternator, which feeds the electrolyzer, but you need to put, obviously, a contact breaker and a gas pressure limiting switch to make sure that if anything ever should go wrong, the whole system switches off. The electrolyzer output goes through a bubbler to make sure that none of the electrolyte ever gets past the bubbler. It goes into a tank to hold some additional gas in there. The tank itself has a pressure valve for 10 pounds per square inch, and the output then goes through another bubbler and on into the air input. Now, if you're running HHO and you've altered the timing of the motor, then this second bubbler is filled with water. If you're not altering the timing of the motor, then you fill the second bubbler with acetone. And as before, you feed water droplets into the airstream going into the motor. And the generator then generates mains voltage output that you use for powering other equipment. If it happens to be a stationary system, which is the usual case for something like this, because generally speaking, a generator is used to power household equipment, then what you need is some additional equipment for protection. It's a water tank. The water tank level is controlled by an ordinary float switch like a toilet. That supplies water to the venturi tube, giving the cold water mist into the motor. It also supplies water to a water pump, which maintains the water level inside the electrolyzer, possibly controlled by a water sensor control circuit. There are one-way valves all over the place here. The one-way valves are used to control the direction of flow of everything that passes through, so that if you switch the thing off, you don't get anything drawn back into the electrolyzer from the bubbler system. And it's sometimes recommended that you use a particle filter between the last bubbler and the air intake. But generally speaking, this is a very simple arrangement. The only thing is, how do you start it? And the answer to that is you use a starting battery and a changeover switch. So when you want to start it and everything is cold, you switch the switch over, and that powers up the electrolyzer and builds up gas bubbles, which you'll see going through the bubbler. And when the system's ready to go, you start the generator and flip the switch back off the starting battery so that the generator itself powers the electrolyzer. Now, there is a lot of actual physical information on this, where Selwyn Harris of Australia shows how to alter the timing of a generator. And David Quarry of New Zealand shows his unmodified generator running on water. You can make your own electrolyzer if you wish, and all of the information for that is in the ebook. But in brief outline, a properly built electrolyzer will have more than twice the efficiency that Michael Faraday achieved. In practical terms, if you place 2 electrodes in a body of water and apply 12 volts across them, then only 1.24 volts will be used in DC electrolysis, and the remainder of the power goes to heat the water. That is, this little green bit creates gas, and this big red bit heats the water. If you use 2 cells or 2 sets of electrodes in series, then you get twice as much gas and a good deal less heating. If you put 3 cells in series, you get 3 times as much gas and a good deal less heating. Taking that to its sensible limit, you get 6 or 7 cells in series in a 12-volt system, because a car system produces 14 volts to charge the 12-volt battery, and so 7 individual cells inside your container are very effective for that sort of voltage. If you're going to do that in a single container, then you need separate bodies of electrolyte. And so the metal plates need to be embedded in both the sides and the base of your container. Bob Boyce, who's the most advanced person in this field that I know of, has developed a very effective system. He's developed a very large DC system which has 100 cells inside his electrolyzer container. And for that, he takes an AC inverter and rectifies it and gets about 155 volts DC, because he's operating on an American system. That 155 volts gives you about 1.5 volts per cell in your electrolyzer. But he's then taken that on further, and he's produced this arrangement here, which is a very serious free energy system itself. He's using a 6.5-inch diameter iron dust core toroid. That's iron dust embedded in epoxy resin. Now, to do this, he has produced a series of windings on the toroid, which are very, very carefully done. As he says, the winding of this toroid needs to be better than military quality. The winding has to be done very carefully indeed. You start with a red winding, which goes all the way around the coil, all the way around the toroid, I should say. That coil is wound clockwise and is led out to feed the electrolyzer. And it feeds the electrolyzer through a heavy-duty choke. This large toroid, which is from Micrometals in America, has got the initial winding shown in red here, and it goes round under the primary windings shown on top, all the way around the coil, all the way around the toroid. That coil is wound in a clockwise direction, and it feeds the power input through a heavy-duty coil, acting as a choke, through the winding around the toroid, and into the electrolyzer. The other side of the power supply is also fed through a heavy-duty choke through to the other side of the electrolyzer. Now, the important part of this is that you have 3 additional windings. There's a start and a finish to each winding. Each winding from memory is 47 turns. You have a start and a finish winding, and a start and a finish winding. And they're going round anti-clockwise round the toroid. They're all equally sized and equally spaced, and the turns have to be very effective. The winding wire on all of these winds is solid copper, which is coated in silver and then insulated, typically with Teflon. It's very important, the quality of winding of this. That's then driven by an electronics board. The electronics board details are in the ebook, and you can see the exact details of how to wind them there. The electrolyzer system is the same as before. You have a gas pressure switch going through a relay, feeding the inverter, and a circuit breaker going from the vehicle electrics to feed the system generally. Now, this is a very important system, and this gives you a gain of 5 or 6 times greater than you would have had operating on DC. Operating on DC, when you properly build the electrolyzer, you're expecting a minimum of more than twice what Faraday thought was the maximum possible. And with this gain of 5 or 6 times, you end up with a system that is at least 10 times more effective than Faraday thought was the maximum. The technology has just moved on. But to be honest, this arrangement here generates excess energy which is drawn in from outside. So perhaps we should be honest and say the electrolyzer is only twice as effective as Faraday, but it's been fed by additional 5 times the energy flow. But the electrolyte in this is important. Bob recommends going for the maximum possible, and the effective electrolytes are potassium hydroxide or sodium hydroxide. The concentration of potassium hydroxide, which is the slightly better one, is 28% by weight in distilled water. And because of that, you have to use grade 316L stainless steel electrodes. Right. Now, as Selwyn Harris of Australia points out, it's not all that difficult to alter the timing of a small generator. And he gives instructions with detailed photographs of how exactly you go about doing that. Right. And he shows the way that he builds and modifies valves that are used in the construction. This is an arrangement of one of his valves where he uses a ball in a rough cutout in a metal plate. And he shows specifically how and where you alter the timing and the parts that you use and need and adapt for doing that. But generally speaking, what you're saying is the way to get considerable amounts of very simple free energy is running a standard generator designed to produce electricity, but you run it on water rather than using a fuel. The fuel typically is petrol. Okay, this device here is something that I think you should be aware of. This is not a free energy device. This would be powered by a free energy device. But this is the Elmer Grimes design of 1961. This produces large quantities of clear, clean water out of the air. It's patent US 2996897. This device here is capable of supplying large quantities of clean, pure water drawn from the air. If you have a refrigerator, your refrigerator is a heat pump, and it is an efficiency of 300% or more. In other words, it moves 3 times as much heat as you would expect from the electricity that it draws in. Now, you will see ads for drinks on television, and they show the drink having water condensation on the outside, implying that the liquid in the tumbler is cold. Well, this is a glorified refrigerator, this system here. This particular device is very simple. It is a large container, and it has a whole series of cooled metal plates inside it. The plates have got slots in them so that air flows through all of the plates. They've got cooling pipes going through every container there. They're sloped downwards to give better surface area and to cause the water to run off. And in addition to that, there is a windscreen wiper style arrangement which moves round the entire circle around every single plate in the system, wiping off the water which is condensed from the air onto the surface. It's a very effective system and a very simple system, and there are lots of places in the world where clean water is needed. This device itself really needs to be powered by a free energy device. Okay, moving on. It's possible to run a vehicle on solid fuel. such as wood chips or coke. This, or coal even. This is something that was done during World War II a good deal. This contraption on the front of the tractor produces gases which are used to burn inside the engine to actually power the tractor. This is something that's been used extensively during World War II when petrol was in short supply. And what it does is it burns the solid fuel in insufficient air. That produces hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and methane, all of which can be burnt in an internal combustion engine. Okay, this particular arrangement of using solid fuel was used extensively during World War II when petrol was in short supply. It can be done by burning the solid fuel in insufficient air. And when you do that, you produce hydrogen, carbon monoxide, and methane, all of which can be burnt in an internal combustion engine. The arrangement is simple. You have limited air going in at the top through a whole body of burnable material. The ash gathers at the bottom when you operate the shaker unit. The gas coming out goes through a filter arrangement here, and there's a blower that helps pass air through. That goes into the engine manifold, and that effectively can run a tractor or other engine, such as a lorry or a car, without any great difficulty. This is, though, a somewhat dangerous arrangement when you're trying to refuel it, because you've got carbon monoxide being produced, and carbon monoxide binds with hemoglobin. So a more convenient and simple alternative to petrol or diesel engine is to be preferred. But all of the necessary construction, use, and maintenance details are in the appendix of the ebook, along with diagrams and photographs, explaining exactly how you can build this particular unit, which is a slight upgrade to the version that was used during World War II. Okay, moving on then. We have the homopolar or end machine of Michael Faraday, produced in 1831. This is a device that is of limited use in that it produces very low DC output voltage, typically less than 1 volt, although the output current can be up to 1,000 amps. And that combination suits simple electrolysis, but not much else. Faraday's arrangement was a horseshoe magnet on each side of a metal disc, moving the disc round in a circle, spinning it, and putting a contact on the axle and on the outer rim would produce an electric current. Now, the current can be very high, so it's difficult to get a good contact. So a bath of mercury was one of the options used to make it work reasonably well. The main problem is that it's difficult to get reliable takeoff. But in 1987, 3 of the Borderland science team, Michael Noe, Peter Lindemann, and Chris Carson, discovered a version which produced sawtooth AC output. And an AC output allows a step-up transformer to be used, raising the output voltage and lowering the output current. Their design has 4 permanent magnets glued between 2 metal discs, and for additional mechanical strength, they wound copper wire around the outer edges in case their glue bond failed. This is the way the construction looks. You've got north and south facing magnets here, and you've got 2 ordinary pickups for the AC output, and you use a little motor to spin the disc. The output was estimated at 100 amps. The output voltage was not affected by the speed of rotation, but the frequency of the output of the AC was. It seems impossible that there should be a voltage across what appears to be a direct short circuit, but this is the way that it actually does work which shows that we don't really know all that much about what we're trying to do. Just remember that a spinning copper cylinder exerts a large sideways force on a permanent magnet. This doesn't happen with cylinders made from other metals. But that is a useful way of improving on the Faraday machine. It's difficult to get a powerful permanent magnet motor running because most designers don't provide enough information. This one from Victor Diduk is an exception in that he shows specifically where you position everything and where you can actually add in steel bolts into the outer covers to provide a diversion and an adjustment for the magnetic fields inside the actual motor itself. I'll skip on from that because that's a rather difficult one and we're short on time. So let me move on to a version of the Bedini battery charging system. And this is a self-powered version. Most chargers have the problem that they run the drive battery down when they're operating. This one doesn't. This one has 5 permanent magnets embedded in a rotor. It has a bifilar wound coil. One of the windings provides trigger signal for a TIP 3055 or 2N 3055. The neon diode, or neon bulb I should say, is not part of the circuit. It's there in case some bright spark takes the battery that's been charged out from the system, because the battery being charged is used to restrict the voltage on the system. There is a little mechanical switch used once per revolution to pass some current through to the driving battery. Now it's a little difficult to see that. This is what the lever switch looks like, but if you separate the circuit into its 2 parts, it's easier to understand. With the switch in its main position, the driving battery feeds power through the coil, through the transistor, triggered by the second winding of the coil, to give a pulse which is fed from the collector through to the battery, which is attached to a different voltage level than the driving battery. If you don't do that, then the driving battery will just feed its power straight through to the battery under charge, which is not what you want to happen. In the other switch position, the pickup is rectified and passed directly into the driving battery, charging it somewhat. Now, this is slightly subtle because there are 5 magnets on the rotor, and because there are 5 and the 2 coils are lined up directly opposite each other, they are triggered at different times. When this one is triggered, this one is halfway between 2 magnets and vice versa. So you don't get a pulse on both coils at the same time, but both parts of the circuit operate independently. And because of that, a mechanical switch can select between them. You could put additional output coils at 72-degree angles around the rotor if you want. The rotor is actually nearly 2 inches thick and weighs about 2 kilograms because it's constructed from laminate flooring material. It's 6 inches in diameter, and the rotor is pushed round when the transistor switches on in response to the signal from the trigger coil. Okay. It's likely that the thickness of the rotor was caused by the size of the magnets that were being used, rather than anything else. Again, an interesting part of this arrangement is being suggested by the Russian experimenter, that he says a much greater effect can be had from coils like this. If you wind all the coils with 2 strands and connect them just like Dennis did in his very simple system, connecting one coil to the next all the way around the system. He says that that increases the input power by 15%, but it increases the output power by 65% if you do just one of them. If you do more than one, the effect is multiplied and increased. Okay, very simple battery charger circuit. This one is from Alex Core. It's the first one he ever shared. And it's very effective. I had an email from a guy who used to charge his battery with an ordinary mains battery charger. He then built this circuit from Alex Core and found that if he powered this circuit with his mains charger, his battery charged fully in half the time. This charger is very simple and pretty effective. What you have is a very simple coil wound on a cardboard former. The coil itself, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The coil itself is just 200 turns of wire. It's air cored, and it's just uses a 555 timer circuit to drive an ordinary transistor. The arrangement of the components on the 555 produce a very short, sharp pulse, which means that the draw from the 12-volt dry battery is not great. But that circuit generates more than 200 volts, which you can see if you connect a capacitor and a diode across the output. Now, with a voltage of that size, you can actually charge 4 batteries rather than just one. But anyway, that's a very simple circuit. Free energy is so easy to get that you can do it very simply. Milkovich designed...
Sorry to interrupt, Patrick. Can I just add to listeners now to what you had presented on the LX4 battery? That there's a possibility that Fesig would come up with a workshop for that one because it's so easy to make. Am I correct, Patrick?
No, not really. There's a more simple and more powerful circuit from Alex Core, which was his 5th or 6th shared circuit.
Mm-hmm.
The one there is, that one is a simple early build that he operated, but that's not the one that you would necessarily do for a workshop.
Right.
The workshop one can be more simple than that and more powerful.
Wonderful. We're looking forward.
And it doesn't need a 555 timer. It just uses a single transistor.
Right.
Okay, moving on. Milkovich has a very clever arrangement, which is purely mechanical. It's a lever and a pendulum. And the pendulum is arranged in position so that when you swing the pendulum, the lever goes up and down in a hammer action. Now, that has a COP of 12. So in other words, you're gaining 12 times the energy. And if you're in a hot climate, pumping water up from a well, that's hard work in hot weather. But you can do that much more easily if you arrange your pump to be the lever arm on a system like this. Then you can do the pumping of the water by just swinging the pendulum by pushing it with just one finger. Now that's a purely mechanical gain of a serious amount of energy from, it is free energy, and it's quite simple. People don't believe that you can do things like that. But this glass container here has a pendulum inside it. The pendulum arm has got a magnet weight at the bottom. There's a plate housing on both sides and a lever arm that's linked to the actual pendulum itself. Now what happens is when the magnet at the bottom of the pendulum swings across to one side, a piece of string drops a plate containing a magnet down so that it opposes the incoming pendulum arm. And that compresses energy into the magnetic field. And the pendulum gets a little extra push from that.
Mhm.
Now, that particular pendulum had been running for 2 years non-stop when I put that into the ebook. Now, that went to the ebook a couple of years ago. I haven't checked since, but if it's been left alone, I think you can take it that it's been running for 4 years at this stage. Okay, another way of gaining free energy is done optically. Now, what you have is a system here which is a gain of more than 9 times. It's a quartz envelope, and in the quartz envelope you have xenon gas, which is under pressure, and two-pointed dielectric materials. The higher the pressure of the xenon gas, the higher the overall gain. But the patent itself includes tables of bench tests where fluorescent lamps were tested as the load. From the point of view of any individual lamp, without using this device, you'd need 40 watts of electrical input power to give 8.8 watts of light output. The rest being is converted to heat, that is. That's an efficiency of about 22% during the bench tests. Each lamp required 0.9 watts of input power in order to produce 8.8 watts of light output. That is a lamp efficiency of more than 900%. And the power input was only 2.25% of the original 40 watts required. Now that's quite an impressive performance for such a very simple device. Like I say, this is just xenon gas under pressure. Okay, moving on, we come to a device which is motionless, which is a very popular thing with people who want to build systems. Don Smith, who's American, or was an American, I should say, because he's passed on now, he promoted magnetic transmission of power. It's particularly attractive doing that because you can get many copies of the output power without having to increase the input power in any way. It's like a radio station. The radio station is not affected no matter how many radio sets tune into the radio station. The output of the radio station transmitter is fixed. Now, what Don Smith has done here is he's built a Tesla coil transmitter, and the primary coil is about a quarter way up the secondary coil. Now, that's been boosted at high frequency and high voltage by a device here which is used for driving neon tubes. That is driven by a 12-volt input, and it generates thousands of volts, typically 9,000, and a high frequency of typically 35,000 pulses a second. It's an interesting arrangement, and he claims that you can take off this equivalent copy of the input power on every one of the output receivers there. Now, the thing to remember about this is an exponential system, because the output power is proportional to the square of the voltage, and it's proportional to the square of the frequency. So if you double the frequency and you double the voltage, then the output increases by a factor of 16 times. In his design, he raises the frequency from around 50 cycles a second to about 35,000 cycles per second, which is a factor of 700, giving an output power gain of 490,000 times, because he raises the voltage to about 9,000 volts, which is 40 times greater than the mains voltage. And that gives a gain of 1,600 times. So overall, the output power gain of the whole lot is about 784 million times on every single output. The gap between the transmitting coil and the receiving coils is never really mentioned, but it needs to be chosen carefully, as that distance has a major effect on the signal received by the receiving coils. Okay, moving on, if we can manage to move on.
I think
Um,
we can stop here and then we can continue in another presentation. What do you think, Brad?
We could, yeah, we're filling out the
It's
time
going
pretty
on
well.
2 hours now, and
Hmm.
and then we have to, make a summary and go around the table and then close the meeting. And we need a couple of minutes for that. Yeah.
It's a shame because, I mean, we've had so many problems.
We had so many problems. Yeah, with the
Yeah,
interferences, Patrick. It's a shame. It's so exciting. Your presentation. I mean, you should be here to see how excited Elizabeth was just now when you go to that. Wow, it's some amazing devices.
To be honest, the actual document that you can download has all the information, and you will find the video of all this on my YouTube channel.
Sure.
It's already there.
Nothing like you presenting it like this live in Fesig, and we are so honored and grateful to you, Patrick.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Patrick. I'm sitting back here going, oh, I've only gotten half of the picture of all the studies that I've been doing prior to this, and so you filled in a lot of the questions today. So I really thank you.
We've been trying to keep it very simple today.
We're so looking forward to the next presentation that you make to continue with the rest of it. Could you hear me?
Yes, I did indeed.
Okay. Gonna press. Want to wrap up?
Okay. Alrighty. I think what I'll do is I will hand back over to Crystal, and if I can, go ahead, Crystal, and talk for a minute, and I'll see if I can get the.
Right. I would like to add to this meeting with a few announcements. That is, Fesig has just before we started this meeting, we had been producing a music video for Fesig. Our very first music video titled "Power for Nothing, What for Free," and we are very lucky and very happy to have. And there are about 8 of us, like all together, whom you will see in our music video, and I hope it will be edited in such a way that it's going to be the Fesig music video. I have also produced a video on Dr. Elizabeth Donovan and what she's doing in her lab and the devices she's coming up with. And one is a laser pen that goes into her 3D printed casing, and at the end of the casing is a quartz crystal. Okay, Elizabeth, would you like to explain how this pen works?
Sure. It's essentially a crystal that has multiple facets on it with multiple reflections. And this is using your protocol. So I didn't know if it would work or not, so we've been testing it, and it seems to have quite an effect. The next version that we have is going to be it's going to be a lithium niobate rod with two lasers on either side to actuate it, and that's supposed to have at least 10 times the effect. So I'm quite impressed with the results of this one, and it's very, very simple. It's just a chunk of crystal that's activated by the laser.
Say, if my hand needs healing, how would you go about using this one? Okay.
And it works for pain relief.
It really feels good. Yeah, the energy gets pulsing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right. So this is what will be offered by Fesig coming up soon. uh, this is one way of us raising funds for us to keep going as well, so we can then continue with our good work for you. Website truevisionofpeace.com/Fesig, Fesig.html, and go into our YouTube channel, which is linkable on the website, and also our Facebook. Join us and help us spread the word, because this is a very beneficial thing that everybody, if you, I mean, chip in and help us out and support us, we're gonna be quite an impactful organization. Right. Now, I would like to go around the table. Is there anything that we have missed that you think I have not mentioned? Right. Oh, yeah, we need some donation as well. Those of you out there who has some extras to pay forward. We're really looking forward to some help, because traveling and organizing things a lot costs money, and we need that
And
to keep going.
prototyping.
And prototyping, and Elizabeth with a lab. Well, you know, when that video is being released, you see how expensive it can be to maintain the lab and to buy equipment and materials to keep going her research and her devices that we will slowly be coming up with. And this laser one is just one of them, and there will be
Right.
a couple of other devices that will be
That's
coming up with.
relatively cheap. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like a 10 euro laser and
yeah,
5 euros for the plastic, another 5 for the crystal.
yeah,
So I mean, these are pretty cheap.
yeah.
But what we want to do is to make it to where anybody can replicate these.
Yeah, of course we'll be redesigning the casing so it looks better and
Aesthetically, yeah.
aesthetically,
Yeah.
and we will be selling these ones for those of you who don't want to make it, or don't have the time to do it, or don't want to mess around with the equipment and materials. It's all very well, because we are going to make this, we're going to produce it, manufacture it, and sell it to physics sites. Okay, so this is one of it, and in the pipeline, we're talking about coming up with a hairbrush that will promote hair growth, and
a toothbrush.
and toothbrush. What do you call it? Ultrasonic.
It's an ultrasonic toothbrush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will get rid of decay
And plaque. Yeah.
and plaque, and tightens the teeth as well.
Yeah, and quite possibly using the laser effect that you see in this device.
You mean like this on the teeth? Wonderful. And there's another device that you're thinking that you could be coming up with?
Yeah. There's several devices.
Yeah, well, in the pipeline, okay? And only as we come along with it and it's sure to be, then we will announce again, okay? Right. So for the time being, we urge you to support us, okay? Come to our website, join us, subscribe, and pay forward if you can, and we can come out with these devices a lot quicker. So I would like to go around the table. Before I do that, I would like to thank Patrick. Thank you so much, Patrick, for choosing to be with us and doing what you do, which is so wonderful, because it's so supportive for all concerned, in this free energy, alternative energy community.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so let's go around the table before we wrap up the meeting. Is there anything you want to say, Patrick, before we call it a day for the meeting?
No, there's nothing I want to say. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Oh yes, we forgot the Q&A.
I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So the Xeon light bulb. Is it possible to create a little device that you could plug into a light socket and then plug the light bulb into that to make it work? Would it work that way?
Yes, certainly.
And would it be prohibitively expensive to seal up Xeon?
No.
Okay. I went to a website once, and it showed some health benefits with Xeon gas. Is there any kind of health benefits for this being exposed to this frequency, you think?
I wouldn't have thought so. but there are plenty of health devices that you can build yourself without any trouble.
Oh yeah, and I would like to comment on that one, is that we have been experimenting with xenon flash tubes with the bucking magnetic fields, and yes, it does have a very positive health effect.
Right. Okay. Is it possible? I mean, could it be sold under health benefits instead of free energy to get away from the powers that be? Do you think that would even work? Maybe
Well,
as a
health benefits are easily as much attacked as free energy.
Oh.
So you don't really want to claim that you can cure anything or
Right, exactly.
make anything work in the medical field.
You have to promote it as an experimental device.
Yeah. So that's the
Yes.
reason why Fesig is starting off with small, simple devices with
Mhm.
small benefits. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say small benefits. It's quite good with what we are thinking of producing first.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's very beneficial, but it's not like a big issue that you'll be attacked for.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's literally about the verbiage that you stay within the law of saying you're not curing or healing anything, but maybe you're affecting energy, affecting balance, things like that.
Mhm.
And it makes a difference.
No, or just an experimental device.
Exactly.
Wow. How about it clears Wi-Fi radiation? Does it do that? Would a Xeon tube do that?
No, I wouldn't do that.
Oh, great. Okay.
Right. Thank you, James. Is there any other questions? This is Guido. Guido is an expert on music, soundtrack making. So he's our sound engineer for our music video production. And of course, Dr. Hughes is our producer. She's our music video producer. And
It's really exciting. Thank you all for coming, and it's really exciting to see you come together.
Oh, thank you. Right, so let's go around the table. Any other questions from anybody else? Time's marching quickly, marching on. So anybody has any other question? Hey, oh, good to see you. Oh, do you have any question? You are in Europe, I know, Sweden.
Yeah, I'm Sweden right now. No, I have no questions at all right now. It's just been really great to see Patrick talking. I was in touch with Patrick some time ago via email, and he because I'm working on water technology, and he suggested I talk to Dave Lawton, which is probably something I will do. Maybe next time I come to England, we'll see. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the water thing. I just had Swedish water conference dealing with different aspects of water, and another one coming up in Sofia in Bulgaria in the end of October. So a lot of stuff going on.
We don't see you. Can we have a look?
Yeah, my camera's not working, so.
People here would love to see your face. Yeah. Anyway, I hope not to miss you next time when you come over to England.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So let's move around the table. Is there anybody else? Fred, thank you so much for co-chairing this meeting with me. Do you have
No problem.
Unfinished business?
No, I'm not right now. We have discussions for the core group after we finish the recordings, but other than that, this has been an excellent meeting once again, and I really thank Patrick being here. So I'm going to mute myself back.
Oh, it's so exciting. Yeah, we'd love to see your next presentation, Patrick. So, James, is there anything that you'd like to say before we wrap up the meeting?
Yeah, Patrick, do you have an addendum, sorry, for an update? Because you said that was released 2 years ago, that document. Are there more devices in part 2?
The ebook has got about 165 devices in it. It's a free download, which you can download anytime you want from any one of 4 different websites. There are quite a number of videos on my YouTube channel, and there is a notes document on every video presentation that's made. So you can get vast amounts of information if you want. The videos are aimed at being very simple in content and as non-technical as possible.
Yeah, but my question was, do you have more, are people submitting more devices for you to review, and are you planning to do another another PDF that has more?
Well, the PDF that I have at the moment, I've just lopped 730 pages off, which is a total of 2,600 pages left in it. And one of the struggles I've had over the years is to keep the volume of the ebook down far enough so that it doesn't put people off if I can avoid it. But people are reluctant to read things that are that size nowadays. And the answer is yes. I get fed information from people on a fairly regular basis. It's not as bad now as it has been in the past. In the past, I had to upgrade the ebook every week, typically. Now I can get away with every month.
Well,
But,
I was curious. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, some of these devices, at least like around magnetic fields, have health and wellness effects, and you haven't mentioned any of that. Have you noticed certain healing effects just being in proximity of these units? Has anyone reported anything like that?
Well, I'm a writer rather than a builder of prototypes. One of the videos on my YouTube channel is on health devices, and there's quite a lot of detail on that. But for instance, you need a good quality earth for a lot of devices, and I have no access here to any form of earth other than the mains earth, which is not what you want to connect to free energy devices if you can avoid it under any circumstances.
Okay.
Right. Thank you so much, Patrick. And James, I would like to say that it's really exciting. We're gonna have Mark McClendish with us for the next meeting, hopefully, because he will be talking about the secret space program technologies as well as the what's the technology? Fuel file technology and related technologies.
Yeah, it's the secret space program as well as different technologies related to that. Yeah. But I also have one question for Patrick is, have you considered possibly breaking it into 2 separate volumes?
It's actually divided into 26 different chapters. It's not really practical to divide it up into lots of little pieces. Okay. People keep asking me from year to year, why not have a printed copy? But you'd need like 3 reams of paper closely printed on both sides in color to cover it. The volume is just physically too large.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. So we will then move on flux liner, not fuel file. So
the flux liner.
Yeah, I didn't mention it correctly. So James, you could also would you co-chair with me for the next meeting when Mark comes on, because he's touching on the subjects that you are really expert in. James, perhaps you would like to.
Yeah.
So just talk.
What did you have a specific question for me?
No, I just said.
Other than I'll be there.
Can I ask you to co-chair with me?
Sure. Okay.
When Mark comes on.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys have pretty much a good feel for the whole topic, so I think you'd have a lot of interesting questions to ask us.
Mark has yet to reconfirm with us the day that he could make it for the meeting, for the next meeting. which will be on the 20th of September. Yeah, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. So thank you, James.
And you know, Mark McClandish has whistleblowers talking to him constantly on this, so I think that
Mark is recommended by Elizabeth, and he happily gone to our website to have a look and happily accepted my invitation for him to talk here. It's just a matter of reconfirming on the date that he would be able to be available to speak at Fesig. Right. So now we move on to Ron. Hey, Ron, bro, you got anything that you would like to say before we end the meeting?
Yeah, I've got a excuse me. I've got a question for Patrick. The one that you were showing that used a 555 timer. You mentioned there was one that was much simpler that didn't use a timer, and I wondered what that was. Has it got a specific name or some kind of a title to it that you didn't mention, Patrick?
I think we covered it in the previous session that I was on with you. It's effectively a version of the Joule Thief, but it's a very high power version that produces hundreds of volts at high current. And it can charge 4 batteries, if you're rich enough to buy 4 batteries, from one drive battery. He specifies the drive battery as 12 volts, 8 amp hours, and the charging batteries as 12 volts, 12 amp hours, which is the size used in mobility scooters. But it's just in the set of Alex Core battery chargers in chapter 6 of the ebook, okay, or in the FESIG 1 notes.
Okay, that tells me where it is anyway. I'll look it up. I'll look it up. I've got your page there. I think you just mentioned there's 26 chapters. I came up with the one I found has 24 chapters plus a bunch of stuff down below.
Yes, I tell a lie. I knocked 2 of the chapters out, so it's now 24.
Okay.
Oh, you can easily access Patrick's ebook and websites and whatnot through the links that I've put on our website, Fesig's website. If you go to a description of his bio and introduction to Patrick, you'll be able to see the links. Just click on it and it opens up. And he updates it.
That's okay. We don't mind if you lie once in a while, Patrick.
That's okay.
Thank you, Patrick. Right, last but not least, Pontus. Have you got anything that you'd like to say before we close the meeting, Pontus?
Oh, I was a little bit late for the meeting, but I hope I will want to thank Patrick for his excellent works. So,
thank you.
It's lovely to see you again this meeting, Pontus. Yeah. Right, so there being no other business, we will adjourn this meeting to the next meeting on the 20th of September 2017. It's on the 3rd Wednesday of the month. Starts promptly at 7:30 p.m. GMT or BST. Yeah, right. So thank you very much, everyone. It's wonderful to see you here, and thank you for taking time off to attend this meeting with Patrick speaking. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Fred. Thank you all. Namaste. 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 Right. Okay, let's end the meeting now.
My recording is off.
Recording. Stop the recording and.